what is up, everybody? So today we're on the 2023 Kawasaki Z125 Pro, and I've had it about a month and a half. I'm coming right up on 1,000 miles, so I figured it was time to do a 1,000-mile review. I don't want this video to be like a negative video overall, but two of the big things that stick out after owning the bike for 1,000 miles are negatives, and that is the speed of the bike. So I'm not necessarily talking about top speed. The advertised top speed, if you just Google, you get around 62. I joined a Z125 Pro Facebook page, and some people were saying 67 was their top speed. And with the stock gearing, 67 on my bike at the middle 50s, the speedometer's off by about 4 miles an hour. So if you were doing an indicated 67 with stock gearing, then newsflash, you're really doing about 62, 63. So that speed correlates with what you'll get if you just Google it, 62, 63, and that would be your GPS speed with stock gearing. And there's a big difference that you need to pay attention to with top speed versus cruising speed. So one of the biggest downfalls of this bike is that, in my opinion anyway, without doing any heavy modifications, the best I can hope for at 5'7" and 165 pounds is to cruise on flat ground. I say cruise, wide open throttle, not in a tuck position, just riding along like I am now. If I was on flat ground, full throttle, no headwind, no tailwind, just perfect conditions as far as wind is concerned, just static, it's 55 to 56. If I tuck, I can push that up to 58 or 59, and I have to go downhill if I want to hit 62 or 63. Now, I do have +1 on the front sprocket as far as gearing is concerned, so that's part of the reason. But even with stock gearing, just add 2 miles an hour to those numbers and then subtract 4 because of the error of the speedometer. So now it doesn't change that much. But after 1,000 miles, the biggest thing that sticks out is at full throttle on flat ground, the best I can hope to poke along at is 55, 56. Headwind or any kind of slight uphill, even if it's just the smallest noticeable grade, you're looking at 52. So I would say reliably, regardless of conditions, on a straight road minus a steep uphill, steep downhill, expect to slow down to 50. You can reliably, I bet you $100 I can hit 50 regardless of road conditions outside of super steep or stupid headwind. So 50 is like the guaranteed number, and I'm not that big. Also, there's a lot of other factors: where you live, how hot average temperature is, and probably humidity. And while that stuff plays a factor on any vehicle you're driving that's internal combustion engine, on a bike with 8 horsepower, it becomes noticeable. It's just easy to notice those differences. Same stretch of road in the morning versus the evening, I can notice a 2 mile an hour difference. And unless you're just really paying attention to wind conditions and stuff, there could be other factors, but for some reason the bike usually tends to run faster speeds on straight flat road when it's hotter out. Maybe the lack in performance because it's sucking in hot air compared to hotter air temperature and less dense air to have to push through, and wind resistance, I don't know. So anyway, I've harped on that long enough, but just if you're going to get one of these, you need to be very realistic about the speeds that your local routes and roads and driving areas are going to require you to do, and if 50 miles an hour reliably is going to be fast enough for you. And then also the other big negative that I mentioned at the beginning is fuel economy. You will get nowhere close. I mean, nowhere close to the 137 or 132 or whatever Kawasaki claims. The best fuel economy I have gotten since owning it in 1,000 miles and filling up at different gas stations, and I've checked every single tank I've ran through the bike. Every single time I fill it up, I reset the trip meter and I check it the next time I fill up, do the math on it. The best I've gotten is 86. That was with stock gearing and a completely stock bike. So that's not even a true 86 because the speedometer's off by 4 miles an hour. It's technically probably a little lower into the 80s, 82, 83. I didn't crunch the number difference in my head if I just had to guess. The worst I've gotten is commuting it back and forth to work on a very, very windy day. And the route I took that particular day had a little bit more uphill and downhill, and I got 69. And other than +1 front sprocket, this bike just has Kawasaki Brad's O2 Delete and heavy-duty clutch springs. The clutch springs should have no effect on fuel economy. Naturally, the O2 Delete adds 2 to 3% more fuel across all throttle positions. So naturally, you're gonna hope to make a touch more power, and as a consequence, you are going to have worse fuel economy. I can still, get 80 miles to the gallon. That 69 was kind of an outlier. But just know that you're not going to get anywhere near 132 or whatever the exact number that Kawasaki advertises on the spec sheet. You're not going to get that. Now that we got those two out of the way, I took a little longer than I should have on getting those two out of the way. Other than that, the bike is exactly as anticipated it would be. It's very fun. It is very nimble. Riding curvy roads like I've been doing here in this video. Granted, I haven't been pushing, the bike or pushing the speed. It's just fun to rip around on. The first two things I've mentioned are, they shouldn't really hinder you from buying the bike. There should be considerations. The fuel economy, not really so much. 70 miles to the gallon, worst case, is still good fuel economy. But the speed is really, if you can live with reliably hitting 50 to 55, because again, I'm kind of a lightweight compared to a lot of the adults that ride these bikes. So if you can live with commuting or just whatever you're buying the bike for, just for fun, whatever, if you can live with knowing that 55 GPS flat ground, I'm not tucked, I'm not trying to milk every mile per hour out of it, is what you're going to reliably see, then it's fine, totally fine. You just you see the top speed of 62, and yeah, that's only 7 miles an hour difference, 55 to 62, but 7 miles an hour is a big difference when you're talking 55 to 62. If I could hit 62, wide open flat ground, could hit 62, I'd be comfortable getting on a 4-lane highway for short stretches. When I full tuck on flat ground and I'm pulled out on a 4-lane highway with like a 65 mile an hour speed limit, and the best I can hope for is 55, 56, 57, then you start, that starts changing things. Like, am I really going to jump out on this highway where everybody's already doing 5 over the speed limit? So that's the biggest consideration I think you should make. The bike itself seems to be well built. I've had no issues out of it in these 1,000 miles. Super easy to maintain. It has an oil filter. I know like the older Groms didn't, so you were doing more often oil changes. Everything about the bike is perfectly adequate and fine if you just be realistic and honest with the speed limitation that it has. And that's nothing special. That's a consideration you have to make with a lot of small bore bikes and scooters. You know, am I really going to be satisfied with a 50cc that does 37 miles an hour? Can I, you know, is that going to work for what I'm planning on using it for? Or, hey, I'm buying a TW200 Dual Sport. Can I really live with, you know, being able to only hit, you know, 65? Or if you're even buying a larger Dual Sport, you know, a 250cc Dual Sport, but maybe you have to consider where you live and the terrain, steep hills, and maybe jumping on and off the interstate or something. So anytime you're buying a small displacement bike, those considerations should be a major part of whether you buy it or not. But just wanting to get that out there beyond those two negatives. Like, I was expecting to not get 132 miles to the gallon, but I was still expecting maybe like 100. No. The best I've seen is 86, and that was before the sprocket change, which corrected the speedo. And my average is probably somewhere around 80 miles to the gallon. High 70s, right up to 80. So, other than that, everything about the bike, spot on, haven't had any issues. It handles great, it's super nimble, it has good brakes. You know, the list of upgrades that I would see doing this bike, and like I have done this bike, just kind of revolve around either aesthetics or making the bike more comfortable and speed. You know, it doesn't have any issues with braking or a little second to third shift. No issues with riding wheelies if you are halfway decent at it, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely a fun play bike. Just the biggest negatives, which these negatives apply to the Monkey, the Grom, the Z125. It's just whether you can live with the speed. You know, depending on your area. If it's a second or third bike you're putting in the garage, and it's just a play bike, but if it's your first bike and you're a beginner, I almost don't recommend it. It's just too small. I mean, for a few more bucks, if you have to buy new, you could get a KTM Duke 200. It's got top speed in like the middle 80s, 85, 87, something like that. You know, find you a used Yamaha R3. There are other options that if you buy used, you can get similar price points. So I do not, after 1,000 miles, recommend this as the first bike. It's a great bike to learn on, but if you're going to have to buy it to be able to learn on it and then live with it for some period of time before you can upgrade or whatever, then I would recommend you just go ahead, save the few extra bucks or finance the few extra bucks and go slightly larger. Yeah, and that's about all I got on this 1,000-mile review. No issues with the bike. I love it. It's fun for what I bought it for. You just need to be realistic with what you're buying it for and whether or not it will suit your needs, whatever that need may be. And yeah, that's all I got. So hit me up in the comments, tell me what you think, and be sure to subscribe and share and all that good stuff. I never remind you to do that as a viewer, but it certainly helps the channel, like the videos, all that stuff. And we will catch y'all in the next one.